The sun over Delphos colony shimmered faintly through the translucent domes, casting long, dappled shadows across the compacted red soil of the outpost. Children's laughter echoed near the far perimeter of the comm tower fields, 3 figures darting between relay pylons and storage crates. Clara's denim dress fluttered as she skipped ahead, her wild curls bouncing. Rory lagged behind, his patched green jacket half unzipped, fists clutched with scavenged nuts and bolts he'd pilfered from maintenance bots. In the center, Leo crouched over a loose panel near the tower base, prying it open with a handmade tool. "This is restricted," Clara whispered, eyes narrowed. She kept watch like a seasoned lookout, hands on her hips. "We're not breaking anything," Leo muttered without looking up. "I just want to see how the relay works." Rory chuckled. "What's it do, zap alien spies?" Leo didn't answer. The hum of the relay system vibrated under his fingers as he connected his crude interface. The device pinged once. Then silence. A strange silence. The sky darkened. Shadows converged, 6 of them, moving with surgical precision. Without a word, the children were surrounded. Towering figures, armored in matte black plating, their skin an icy cobalt blue, eyes like frozen moons. Zarith Dominion enforcers. They moved like a single organism. A stunned pulse dropped Rory instantly. Clara reached for him, shouting. Leo tried to shield them with his body, but was yanked back by a massive gauntlet. There was no resistance. No time. The last thing Clara saw before blacking out was the enforcer's expressionless faceplate, reflecting her own stunned eyes. They awoke in cold light. Clara sat upright first, clutching the rough metallic bench beneath her. Around her, vast pillars arched overhead, an oppressive silver-blue courtroom unlike anything she'd ever seen. Leo sat beside her, rubbing his temple, his expression already scanning, measuring. Rory stirred last, groaning, and wiped a thin trickle of blood from his nose. They were not alone. Behind them, 2 Zarith guards stood like statues, unmoving. Before them, a semicircular tribunal of pale, blue-skinned figures sat atop thrones, robes draping their spindly frames. The room felt like a stage for judgment, detached, emotionless, terminal. Subjects appear unharmed. One judge spoke, voice distorted through a translation implant. Their biosignatures confirm Earth-human lineage. Approximate ages, 7, 8, and 9. Leo bristled. "We have names. No one asked you to speak, human." The judge turned to a scribe. "Catalog their belongings. Begin extraction sequence once interrogation concludes." "What extraction?" Clara's voice cracked, defiant. "You are diplomatic leverage. Your lives will serve a greater negotiation," the judge said, already disinterested. "Earth has grown bold." Rory leaned closer to Clara. "Do they think we're hostages or something?" Clara nodded slowly. "That's exactly what they think." At that moment, deep within Earth Command HQ, hidden under the polar ice shelf of Nova Siberia, 3 encrypted alerts triggered simultaneously. Red lights pulsed across a sleek black console. The alerts bypassed all protocols and went directly to 3 specific locations. General Rourke dropped his glass of whiskey as the message appeared. Clara. Captured. Zarith identified. Coordinates locked. He stood without speaking. Around him, the war room hushed. Halfway across the world, in a steel-clad bunker beneath the African megacity defense ring, General Damas was mid-simulation when his screen froze. He read the message once and again, then walked out silently, boots echoing through the hall. No one stopped him. In orbit around Saturn's 3rd mining moon, General Vega abandoned a strategy conference, leaving generals and tacticians mid-sentence. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. All 3 men met within hours, deep beneath Earth's surface in a command chamber known only to a handful, Eclipse Protocol. They were warriors of a kind the galaxy remembered with fear. Rourke, the master of asymmetric warfare and psychological manipulation. Damas, whose infiltration missions were said to make shadows flinch. Vega, who commanded firepower that melted orbital fleets and silenced rebellions. And each of them, for all their brutality and control, shared one trait buried beneath hardened armor: fatherhood. She was supposed to be safe, Rourke murmured, staring at a projection of Clara's last known location. They took Leo in a blind zone, Damas added. No alarms. No pings. We were watching. They ghosted him. They made a mistake, Vega said, his voice colder than vacuum. They didn't just take children. They declared war on us. Back on the Zarith vessel, the tribunal members debated their next move. The enforcers remained behind the children, arms folded. The eldest judge, his skin paler than the others, leaned forward. Earth must know we are prepared to retaliate for their expansion. Holding these, offspring will demonstrate our resolve. They don't care, a younger judge argued. You think Earth's leadership fears for the young? They see them as surplus. You don't know Earth, the older judge said. They are sentimental. Their weakness is emotional. Clara whispered, they don't know Dad at all. Leo's eyes were fixed on a small drone unit hovering in the upper rafters. The unit's lens pulsed with a faint rhythm. Too faint for alien eyes, but not his. His fingers twitched against his leg, mentally building a signal scrambler from memory. Not enough tools, but ideas were forming. Rory leaned back on his heels, pretending to slump in boredom. One of the guards shifted slightly at his movement, telling, reaction time, under a second. Good to know. We need to stall them, Clara whispered. Long enough. For what? Rory asked, low and uncertain. For our dads, she replied simply. The judges recessed briefly, their robes whispering across the floor as they disappeared through a panel behind the throne. Only the guards remained. Silence fell over the chamber. Then, unexpectedly, one of the enforcers stepped forward. He removed his helmet slowly, revealing chiseled blue features, eerily human in symmetry. He crouched before Leo and spoke softly. Do you know why we took you? Leo stared at him. Because you think this is a game. No, because you are pawns. A warning to your kind. Clara stood. We're not pawns. The enforcer's gaze settled on her. There was a flicker of curiosity. And what are you? Bait, she replied. But not for who you think. That night, within the vessel's containment bay, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat against the wall, fingering the frayed edge of her dress. Leo sat beside her, still working on a mental schematic. Rory snored lightly, one hand curled over a stolen food ration. They're afraid of something, Clara said. They should be, Leo replied. They kidnapped the kids of Earth's 3 most dangerous men. The stars outside shimmered past the viewports as the ship drifted silently in orbit over a bare moon. Below them, a storm of war and retribution was brewing, and the Zarith Tribunal had no idea the countdown had already begun. Clara looked out into the stars and said quietly, they'll come. And when they do, they won't knock. A low klaxon echoed in the distance, barely perceptible. Leo tilted his head, recognizing the frequency. He smiled faintly. They're already here. The screen embedded in the chamber wall flickered briefly, a single message flashing for a second before vanishing. Eclipse Protocol active. Hold fast. 3 children sat in silence as the stars turned red. General Rourke stood alone at the edge of Earth's orbit, gazing out through the observation deck of the Vigilant Blade, his flagship. The stars glittered coldly beyond the reinforced glass, distant and indifferent. His face, normally unreadable behind decades of command, was taut with something rare, unrestrained fury. A hollow map hovered before him, shifting with every pulse of Zarith communication traffic they intercepted. Each signal was a breadcrumb leading him to his daughter. Each delay was a threat unspoken. Behind him, his command crew worked in silence. None dared speak unless spoken to. They knew better than to interrupt the general when he was quiet. It meant war was already underway. Meanwhile, beneath the equatorial trench cities, General Damas was already in motion. No grand declarations. No battle orders. Just action. He moved like shadow through the Earth core terminal, bypassing civilian traffic and security with ease. His face was already obscured by a mimic shroud, and in his pocket sat a fabricated identity chip registered to a Zarith diplomat, acquired, forged, and embedded in less than 6 hours. He was heading straight into Zarith territory alone. Damas didn't rely on fleets. He didn't believe in spectacle. The best way to destroy your enemy was from inside their own walls. On Titan Station, General Vega drilled his forces with relentless precision. Rows of mechanized infantry marched in lockstep as his voice barked through the comms. "This is not a rescue mission," he growled. "This is reclamation. We do not ask for our children back. We take them." His armor gleamed under the floodlights, blackened steel marked with deep scars from dozens of campaigns. Every soldier under his command feared him more than death, and they would follow him into it without question. While the galaxy spun on, oblivious to the quiet rage of three men, the Zarith Dominion prepared for diplomacy. In a council hall orbiting their capital moon, the Tribunal's senior advisors reviewed Earth's recent movements. "Their fleets haven't moved significantly," one whispered. "Perhaps we overestimated their reaction." "Earth is always slow to respond," said another, waving the concern away. "Emotion clouds them. They'll bluster, posture, then negotiate." "They will come," said the eldest judge, voice brittle. "They're not as soft as they appear. History proves that." "We have leverage," the younger judge insisted. "Children, genetic heirs. That matters to them." It did matter, just not in the way they thought. Back in orbit, Rourke activated Eclipse Protocol fully. His screen split into 3 encrypted windows, and soon Damas and Vega appeared, grainy, distorted, but unmistakable. "Status?" Rourke asked. Inside their customs network, Damas replied, voice clipped, "Acquiring travel route logs. Found evidence they're holding them on the tribunal carrier Sovereign Silence." Vega nodded. "Deploying Ghost Fleet in 12 hours. Contact blackout until insertion. No survivors on extraction." "Agreed." "Agreed," Rourke said, then paused. "We go silent until confirmation." They didn't discuss strategy further. They didn't need to. They had fought together through wars that bent planets and rewrote treaties. Trust was baked into every breath. While the generals moved, the galaxy began to take notice. On neutral colonies along the Orion Spur, whispers drifted through bars, military outposts, and trading hubs. "Earth's gone dark. Heard the war dogs are loose again. Something about kids. God help whoever pissed them off." The Zarith Tribunal, sensing unease, issued controlled broadcasts showing the children alive and well. Carefully framed images of Clara, Leo, and Rory were distributed to alien news channels. They were shown eating, sitting calmly under guard. "We are treating them with dignity," the broadcast said. "We await Earth's diplomatic envoy." But behind the scenes, cracks formed. Guards reported increased anxiety among the children. Not panic, but an eerie calm. Rory stopped asking questions. Leo stopped speaking entirely. Clara made eye contact too often, as if searching for something invisible in the corners of the room. On the third day, Clara approached one of the guards with a soft voice and a handful of stolen food pellets. "Are your families proud of you?" she asked. The guard blinked. "What?" "For taking children. For being jailers. Do they know?" The question lingered like poison. She walked away without waiting for an answer. That same night, Leo initiated the first test of his makeshift beacon. It was primitive, nearly undetectable, but it piggybacked off the Tribunal's internal maintenance signals, small, invisible ripples that pulsed once every few hours. It only had to say one thing: "We're alive." Damas received the signal while traversing the underbelly of a Zarith customs outpost. He didn't smile. He didn't stop. He simply changed course, rerouting to intercept the Tribunal's core data relay. It was time to remove their eyes. He breached the node in silence, sliding through layers of biometric encryption like a needle through silk. Within minutes, he had seized control of their monitoring algorithms, rewriting their internal records to suggest calm in every sector. While their systems slept, his infiltration team slipped aboard their orbital platforms, undetected and armed. Vega's fleet dropped from stealth near the outer edge of Zareth space, silent and shimmering like ghosts. The ships bore no insignia, no call signs, just mapped black holes and weapons warm enough to scorch cities. His command cruiser hovered above the moon's magnetic field, sensors locking onto the Sovereign Silence. The vessel was larger than expected, mobile, fortified, surrounded by a cluster of escort crafts. "Permission to engage?" asked his lieutenant. "Negative," Vega said. "Not until the others are in place." He stared at the ship holding his son. His knuckles whitened against the command rail. On Earth, political leadership finally caught wind of Eclipse Protocol's activation. The Prime Minister, flanked by advisors, stood before a closed security council, watching a decrypted feed of the general's movements. "They've gone rogue," said a counselor. "They could destabilize everything. They'll tear half the galaxy apart," another warned. The Prime Minister said nothing for a long moment, then whispered, "Let them." Back on the sovereign silence, Rory feigned sleep as a new guard entered the chamber. The boy's fingers slid under the sleeve of his coat where a sharp metallic shard waited, palmed carefully. He didn't plan to use it yet, but he knew it made him feel braver. Leo sat cross-legged near a vent, listening to the low, rhythmic hum of the ship's energy cycles. He was mapping in his mind, overlaying everything he'd learned from overheard alien chatter. He didn't know exactly what would happen when his father came, but he knew it would be fast. Clara stood by the viewport, eyes fixed on a distant shadow that hadn't been there yesterday. A glimmer, a flicker of motion, too steady to be a star. Her heart raced, but she kept her face still. She whispered a single word under her breath. "Soon." That was when the lights flickered. The guards exchanged quick glances. One reached for his comlink. The children didn't move. Across the ship, subtle malfunctions began cascading. Door locks freezing open, surveillance feeds looping old footage, communication channels drowning in static. The tribunal's internal systems began to drown in noise. In a quiet corner of space, the generals waited, each synced by encrypted timer. At 3 o'clock Zarith Standard Time, they would strike. And this time, they weren't coming for a battle. They were coming for retribution. The first detonation came without warning. A silent pulse rippled through the Zarith Dominion's planetary defense grid, brief, brilliant, and terminal. Energy nodes shorted in a synchronized cascade, their glow sputtering into darkness as failsafes failed to deploy. For a moment, the tribunal stationed aboard the Sovereign Silence believed it to be a system malfunction. Then the second wave hit, and all illusion shattered. General Damas had already slipped through the hull of the Sovereign Silence hours earlier, a phantom within its labyrinthine infrastructure. His infiltration team had embedded themselves in the blind spots of security drones, in the quiet corners of ventilation corridors, listening, waiting. When the lights dimmed and alerts sounded, they moved as one. Damas didn't carry a standard weapon. His primary tool was silence. He advanced through the ship with a compact pistol that emitted no sound and left no bodies, just vanishing threats one by one. Surveillance feeds looped endless calm. The tribunal believed the ship was secure. They were wrong. Inside the detention wing, Leo lifted his head at the distant echo of metal against metal. His internal map of the ship, built from weeks of observation and auditory memory, clicked into place. That sound came from Deck E, for levels down. A breach point. Clara gripped his arm, eyes wide. "Is it them?" Leo nodded. "I think it started." Rory jumped up, already slipping the sharpened shard from his coat. "Then let's go." "No," Clara said sharply. "We follow the plan. Wait for the lights." The lights, standard overhead halogens, had been flickering all day, but Clara meant something else. The backup system was tied to the ship's emergency protocols. Once those kicked in, secondary systems would flood the hallway with red strobe lights, signaling a full breach. Until then, the children waited. On the outer edge of the Zarith fleet's defensive ring, Vega's ghost fleet materialized in a synchronized burst of hyperspace fractures. The ships shimmered into view like ghosts dragged into reality, black, silent, and primed for devastation. The Iron Gavel, Vega's flagship, led the charge. Targets locked, his weapons officer reported. "Fire at will," Vega ordered. No rallying cry, no threats, just action. The first barrage tore through the nearest escort cruiser like it was paper. Vega's fleet moved with terrifying precision, bypassing shields, targeting structural weak points. There were no declarations of war. There was no mercy, Ships exploded, one after another, blooming into flame and debris. The Zarith fleet scrambled to respond, but they were slow, overconfident, and used to an enemy who struck with this kind of surgical hatred. Vega stood at the front of the command deck, watching the destruction with a face carved from stone. His son was on that ship. That was the only fact that mattered. Inside the sovereign silence, the tribunal finally recognized the scale of the breach. The senior judge barked orders, but nothing worked. Communications were jammed. The defense grid was offline. Internal sensors showed calm hallways while alarms blared inconsistently, as if the ship couldn't decide what was real. "Get the prisoners," the eldest judge ordered. "Secure them." But the guards sent to the detention wing never arrived. Rourke had entered the battle in a different way. While Vega burned ships and Damas severed arteries, Rourke poisoned the bloodstream. His PSYOPs team had embedded false distress calls into the Zarith Dominion's civilian communication network. The broadcast showed fabricated images of the tribunal torturing human children. The voiceovers spoke of betrayal, manipulation, and cruelty. In one looped video, Clara was shown sobbing as cold hands dragged her away. It was a fake, brilliantly rendered, but emotionally precise. Zarith citizens panicked. Protests erupted across neutral moons. Political factions fractured. Soldiers on the outer colonies began refusing orders. Rourke watched it unfold from a remote command pod, far from the battlefront, surrounded by screens feeding him chaos. He smiled faintly as a message from Damas blinked into his display. "Chamber breach imminent." "Proceed," Rourke replied. In the detention wing, the red lights finally triggered. Clara's breath caught. "That's it." Leo sprang into action, using the panel he'd been prying open for days to short-circuit the cell's magnetic lock. Sparks flew. The door hissed open. Rory bolted out, scanning the corridor. "No guards." "They're busy," Clara said. "We need to reach the elevator shaft." They moved quickly, retracing every escape path they'd memorized. Each turn, each corridor, each duct under a pipe was part of the plan Leo had built in his mind. As they ran, muffled explosions thudded through the bulkheads, growing closer. Screams echoed from distant decks. On level D, Damas emerged from a vent and motioned for his team to fan out. His eyes flicked over a corridor map etched into his display. "Elevator shaft," he whispered. "Converge." The children were already halfway there. On the ship's top deck, the tribunal's panic reached its peak. The younger judges began arguing. One demanded the activation of escape protocols. Another insisted they hold their ground. The eldest simply sat still, eyes closed, listening to the hum of battle drawing nearer. "This was never about leverage," he murmured. "This was about punishment." A sudden explosion rocked the chamber, and the doors burst inward. Vega stepped through the smoke first, his massive frame outlined in flame. Behind him, his mechanized soldiers poured into the chamber, weapons primed. The judges froze. "You have something that belongs to us," Vega said. "You'll burn for this," the senior judge snapped. "You already are," Vega replied. His soldiers opened fire. Down below, Leo pulled Clara through the last crawl space. Rory shoved the elevator door open with his shoulder and peered into the dark shaft. "Where's Dad?" he gasped. "Here," said a voice from above. A cable dropped. Damas slid down with his team behind him, his mimic shroud flickering off as he landed silently in front of them. His eyes scanned each child with surgical precision. Then he grabbed Leo and pulled him into a hard, brief embrace. "Your mother would have killed me if anything happened to you," he said. Leo didn't answer. He just held on for another second. Across the ship, Rourke walked calmly through the chaos. He wasn't in uniform. He didn't carry a weapon. He didn't need one. Everything around him bent to his will. The panicked crew, the hacked comms, the flickering lights that danced like puppets. He entered the tribunal archives and uploaded a final broadcast, one that revealed everything: the abduction, the deception, the tribunal's plan to destabilize Earth. He turned to the camera and looked directly into it. "Let this be your lesson," he said quietly. "We are not a species you threaten. Not ever." Back at the extraction point, Clara clutched her father's coat as the dropship door sealed shut. They lifted off seconds later, the sound of battle fading beneath them. The ship broke through the atmosphere, heading for orbit where Rourke and Vega's vessels waited. In the silence, Rory looked at his dad. "Did we win?" he asked. Vega looked down at him, expression unreadable. "No," he said. "We survived." "That's different." Clara turned to Leo, who was already examining the emergency console beside them. "Do you think they'll try again?" she asked. Leo shook his head. "Not after this." But Clara wasn't so sure. The look in her father's eyes wasn't victory. It was warning, and warnings, she knew, were only useful if someone lived to remember them. The extraction was swift, surgical, and utterly silent. The sovereign silence was nothing more than debris now, its remains drifting in low orbit around a nameless Zarith moon, slowly scattering like ashes on a cosmic wind. From orbit, the fire had faded, but its consequences burned brighter than ever. Earth's ghost fleet vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving no trace but the silence of unanswered questions and a trail of encrypted interference no Dominion technology could decipher. The dropship glided into the hangar of the Vigilant Blade, its hull streaked with carbon scarring. The ramp hissed open, releasing a cloud of pressure vapor, and 3 children stepped into the chilled air of the ship's landing bay. Their clothes were torn, their faces smudged with soot and fatigue, but they walked unassisted. Clara led them, eyes fixed forward, jaw clenched with the kind of poise most adults never mastered. Leo followed with quiet precision, already assessing his surroundings, checking for surveillance, noting guard rotations. Rory trailed, gaze flicking between armored personnel and weapons racks, equal parts awe and adrenaline. General Rourke was waiting. He didn't approach immediately. He stood still, hand behind his back, flanked by 2 command officers. Only when Clara stopped in front of him did he move. His arms opened, slowly, cautiously, and she walked into them without hesitation. "I'm fine," she said against his shoulder. "I know," he replied. Leo nodded silently to Damas, who returned the gesture, unspeaking. They didn't need words. Rory, for his part, rushed into Vega's arms and was scooped up despite his protests of being too old for it. The cold-blooded general said nothing, but his grip said everything. In the hours that followed, medical checks were conducted, formal debriefs logged, and political backchannels buzzed to life like awakened hornets. Earth's central authority, blindsided by the general's rogue actions, had no choice but to pivot. Within 24 hours, the Zarith Dominion publicly announced a unilateral withdrawal from disputed zones and issued a formal apology, carefully couched in neutral language. Privately, they were terrified. Their fleet's losses had been catastrophic. Their tribunal was dead, and the galaxy had seen it happen. Back aboard Earth orbit, the children remained in quarantine aboard the Vigilant Blade, tucked within a secured and shielded wing of the vessel. No one entered without explicit authorization. Guards were rotated every 6 hours. Monitors were checked in person, not automated. Not because they were afraid of attack, but because these children were no longer just children. Rourke visited Clara on the second night. She was seated at a window overlooking the stars, her hands clasped in her lap. He sat beside her without speaking for several moments. "They underestimated you," he said finally. "They didn't understand what I was," she replied, voice steady. "No," he said. "They didn't understand what you are becoming." She turned to look at him, eyes sharp. "Is that why you trained me? In case something like this happened?" "I trained you," he said, "so that if anyone ever took you, they'd regret it." Clara nodded. She didn't thank him. She didn't need to. Elsewhere, Leo sat cross-legged on a diagnostic table, assembling a holographic model of the sovereign silence from memory. Damas stood across from him, arms folded, watching his son recreate the escape route, node by node, section by section. "You missed your birthday," Damas said quietly. Leo didn't stop working. "I'll get another one. You shouldn't have had to build your own beacon. You shouldn't have let them take me." There was no anger in the words, just fact. Damas nodded slowly. "Next time, we start with war. No more delays." Leo looked up. "There will be a next time?" "There always is." In the training bay, Vega stood behind Rory as he tested a shock baton against a dummy drone. The boy's strikes were wild but powerful, driven by instinct more than technique. "You're sloppy," Vega said. Rory grinned. "But I hit it. You won't always be lucky. I won't always need luck." Vega tilted his head, studying him. "You're fearless now." "I was scared the whole time," Rory admitted. "But I was more scared of being forgotten." Vega placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "That was never going to happen." 3 weeks passed. Earth released a quiet internal memo declaring Eclipse Protocol deactivated. The generals returned to their former posts, though the nature of their command had shifted. They were no longer just warriors. They were legends whispered about in the same tone used for catastrophes and miracles. The galaxy, once so quick to test Earth's resolve, now approached with a new caution, laced with fear. Yet it wasn't the fathers that kept the galaxy watching. It was the children. They became subjects of quiet study, each one enrolled into specialized training programs under the guise of rehabilitation. In truth, they were being prepared, trained, not molded into weapons, but into architects of something greater. Earth had learned its lesson. Power wasn't just built in bunkers or forged on battlefields. It was passed through bloodlines, tempered by fire. 10 years later, the girl who once stared down alien judges without flinching stood in front of the United Interstellar Coalition as Earth's youngest ambassador. Clara Rourke spoke calmly, diplomatically, but with the same flint in her voice her enemies once heard in the dark. She wore no armor. She needed none. On her security detail stood Commander Leo Damas, tall and precise, eyes always scanning, always watching. Rumors swirled about what he could do with code, how he had once shut down a cruiser's weapons systems using a handheld console and his mind. And flanking them both, joking with his team, was Special Operative Rory Vega. His record was sealed, his missions classified, but entire world had changed leadership within weeks of his visits. They were no longer children of generals. They were symbols of consequence. In the quiet before her next address, Clara stood at a balcony above the coalition chamber, looking out at 100 gathered species. "They thought we were leverage," she murmured. "They thought we were alone," Leo said beside her. "They thought wrong," Rory added, his voice almost amused. Clara looked up at the stars. The same stars that once hid their prison. The same stars their fathers had scorched to get them back. "They'll never forget us," she said. And she was right. Because in a galaxy where power was currency and cruelty was common, the story of 3 stolen children and the fathers who came for them became more than history. It became a warning.